A warm welcome to Interface here on SABC 3. My name is Tembi Samachele. The African Union celebrated 50 years this weekend. The theme for this year is African unity. The African Union says although the continent has experienced challenges, there has been substantial progress in economic growth and peace efforts and also in democracy. But is Africa really united? And how is this unity measured? And does it benefit Africans? These are some of the questions we're asking tonight on Interface. And our guests are Kofi Kwaku, who is a senior lecturer in scenario planning at Wits University, as well as Mark Bafo, who is from Africa Diaspora. And remember that you can always join in this discussion by sending us your comments on our Facebook page, that is Interface on SABC3, or you can always text us, and our text SMS line is 33762. Well, welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. 50 years of the Organization of African Unity, which was the African Union, headed by our very own Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Lots of celebrations. I was listening to a lot of heads of state talking about it. In 50 years, has this organization done what it was set up to do, Kofi?
I think it hasn't much, but it's a mixed message in terms of the audit. It's not easy. In fact, if you look at the task at hand, 50 years, as much as 50 years is very old, like 2 generations, it is very, very difficult to manage and take a continent like Africa that includes, it's 30 million plus square kilometers. It's a vast region with diversities like almost unbelievable across the world. And it's not easy. So the ideal is still up. So if we want to really audit what the achievements are, I will have to say it's a mixed. But we can be proud, especially that close to the 50th anniversary, we have a woman out of the whole patriarchal system who's now doing her best, and she's cracking the whip.
Okay, good news for Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and for the continent there. But Mark, Africa Day that we celebrated on the 25th, which was yesterday, and I was listening to a number of heads of state talking about how Africa has come so far and we've achieved so much. Yes, we have our challenges, but we really are not doing too badly. Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yes, I do agree. Well, as Magra was saying, it's not easy. We're still a young continent, if I may put it that way. Yes, we have our challenges, but it's working as a united continent that we can achieve and combat our challenges. I agree that the AU is representing something which makes us dream as Africans. We can see our identity, we can remember that we want to do something, and the organization has so many and wonderful objectives. So it's only when working together that we can then take our objectives forward.
Let's talk about some of those objectives. When you look at the objectives that have been set, particularly in recent times, what have we really been able to achieve? Whether it is peace on the continent, or it is, economic growth, or whatever it is that's been set. What can you pinpoint, Kofi, and say, this is something that we can proudly say, under the leadership of the OAU and the AU now, we have done this as a continent and we've gotten it right?
I think the first one is the ability to even consider ourselves Africans is a great ideal that many people don't take seriously. If you were to go somewhere around the continent, it's very difficult for people. I mean, I hear South Africans saying, we are going to Africa. So there are 2 elements in that. So the ideal of being African by itself is very important. It's a great achievement to be able to have 2 things. The sense of place, which links to the geography of the continent. And then the second one is a sense of belonging, which means you can be on the continent and still not belong to that continent. But most important is that sense of belonging that links to the identity, that you belong to a continent. It's a very, very important thing to start with. But next to that, you have also economic issues. Now, Now, if many of you probably know by now that there's an enormous amount of interest about this continent where the growth rate is going up to 5 to 6%. And most African continents, and we've never seen this before, are on a really high road to a large degree in terms of economies. We know the skeptics will say, oh, my goodness, it's not working, or is this sustainable?
And also, they're going to ask, what has that done for Africa? Because we've seen the numbers. The numbers look great at times, don't they, Mark? When you see the economic growth in some of these countries, South Africa included. The fact that it's come down a little bit over the past year and a half is neither here nor there. We have been progressing economically as a continent. But what has that translated to in terms of tangibles for the continent?
I think the problem might be that we haven't had that process of sending our raw materials out of a continent. How do you regulate it so that the continent benefited? For instance, if you take the example of the EU, the European Union. Some statistic figures are showing that 70.6% of the intra-trade is done among the Union. Compared to Africa, where we cannot achieve even 13%.
Mark, we're going to get to those challenges just after this break. But before we go on the break, I want us to highlight the positives first. Because, I mean, we can spend all day looking at the challenges, but there's reason for us to celebrate. There's reason for Africans to be proud of what we've been able to achieve politically, economically, and otherwise. And I want us to just highlight, Kofi, some of those achievements. What can you name off the top of your head and say, we have done this? Not on the idealistic front.
Yes, but remember, the sense of the ideal is very important because that's what bounds people together.
Agreed.
And so from there on, people recognize that they're part of not just a geography, a place, but also be able to contribute, identify with people. And we know if you take social cohesion in South Africa, when people don't feel they're part of something, they usually don't want to contribute. They don't want to get together. And as soon as they start remembering that and that they have that, they can move around. One of the biggest issues we have now is a movement for economic growth.
Yes.
We know the growth is across the continent 5%, but that's a median way of looking at it. It doesn't trickle down. But that's very good news because if you remember, 10 or 15 years ago, The Economist magazine has said, the hopeless continent. There an enormous amount of people are struggling to write the story of Africa, of the growth of Africa. This economic growth, which started about 5 to 10 years ago, is a concrete element of it.
But gentlemen, what I'm trying to get out of you is, so what? So we've got the numbers, we've got the economic growth, but what has it done for us? What has it done for the woman that's picking tea leaves in Kenya, or somebody that is on somewhere in West Africa that is wanting to know, I see the numbers, what has it done for me?
Yes, but it's going to be difficult for everybody to benefit right away from it. Because the growth is taking place at a much more macro level. And then from that macro level, it will trickle down. But of course, you got to have the country's coffers to work towards spending the monies that they need to look at education, infrastructure, if you want, technology issues, women's issues, and then for sometimes the military. So that's where it's going to have to go first before everybody can feel it. But one area where I can put my finger on.
You've got to just hold that thought. You've mentioned at least 5 things that are challenges for this continent, and I want us to touch on that right after this break. Do stay with us. Africa, my Africa, that's what we're talking about tonight on Interface. And my guests are Kofi Kwaku, who is from Wits University, and also Mark Bafo, who is from Africa Diaspora. And before the break, we're talking about just what's going right on the continent. And you wanted to bring up a point, Kofi, about technology.
That's correct.
If you could
quickly.
Mean,
one of the greatest gains we've seen is the use of simple technologies, the mobile technology. the ability to really have in your own pocket some tools that enables you to decide a specific future. And mobile technology has become and is probably going to be one of the most powerful, and we know that. You can do your banking online, you can look at the price of sheep in the specific markets all over the continent. There's probably 7 out of 10 Africans today on this continent who have that device, and the device is changing literally. So simple communication technology is now going cross boundaries. In fact, I have to say this, I know it's a tough one to say, but it's the most subversive instrument we've got. And if we invest in it more, we can change, we can go around governance constraints that we have to help people decide on what they want to choose, where they want to go, and then increase the mobility, because people can't move physically, or goods cannot move. What are they using? The mobile telephone to make things happen. So that's the concrete gain.
Okay, good one. Mark, a lot of our Facebook comments and a lot of our SMSs coming through are lamenting some of the things that are just not going right. You know, for many, many years now on various platforms, we've heard how even our leaders are aggravated by the fact that if you're traveling from Mali to South Africa, you've got to go via France most often. And regional integration, we've talked about it so much. Infrastructure development, we make some gains and then there's problems. What is the problem here? How do we get to deal with these issues once and for all?
I think the problem might be that, I think I've touched it earlier, the problem might be that we don't know how to regulate things. We didn't regulate our resources. Can you imagine that a country like DRC, who got a lot of coltan, which is used in the cell phone devices, is still struggling to move as a country in the continent. I think if we have a retribution of what we have as resources, we can use it to develop our countries. We're sitting on many resources, but unfortunately we're not using it appropriately.
Why are we not using it appropriately, Kofi?
It's poor governance. I see, for example, that there are 2 driving forces that we need to take into account. The first one, the quality of the governance, the quality of the people who are running the countries, and the ability to also mentor and then get to make sure that people are coming back, or people are put in places can deliver what needs to be delivered. And then the other one, the second driving force to me, is finance. Our ability to use our resources in a way that follow the way governance is put together. So if we decided, as you were saying, that we're going to build this, if at the AU this week they decide we're going to do this, governance has to follow up and then execute. So we need to execute quickly enough. We need to put the resources where we need to have them. If you take, for example, the case of the African Union's own budget, I mean, about something like 78.6 million. And out of that, African countries only contributed about 15 million, 0.2 or so. And the rest from people from outside. So we haven't decided on how we want to spend our own resources. Until we do that with the right skill sets, and people are hungry to see this continent deliver and go forward, we're going to have the same problem.
Is it fair then for our leaders, Mark, to say Africa will have African solutions to African problems? We will deal with our issues ourselves. Don't tell us how to run our continent, but do give us the money to progress all of the things that we want to do.
I think, once again, we have the money, but we don't know how to value it. We're sitting in the resources, but we don't know how to value it. Africans don't need to go and borrow money. Why can't the AU sponsor itself? Why can't we enforce and make the member states contribute to empower the organization?
Many of them will say we simply just don't have that money.
We do have the money. Do they contribute? We don't have a proper process to make countries contribute, member states contribute to empower the organization.
But would it be fair, Mark? Would it be fair to say a Nigeria, a Kenya, a South Africa must contribute just as much as a Chad or some of the other smaller countries that really are battling?
Well, I don't think that, we are members of an organization. We discuss and set some contribution. The level of the money that we contribute was discussed, and Chad, as South African, were sitting and they know that each and every country can contribute to this much. So let them respect that.
Okay, fair point.
To me, I would say our economic sovereignty is poorly managed in the sense that you can't ask somebody from outside paying for you and waiting for him to say, no, I don't have anything else to say. You know the saying, who pays the piper, whatever it does, it has to tell him what to do. So if somebody else from outside is paying for what you have to do, they will tell you what to do. So that sovereignty needs to be taken. This is the real independence that we should be celebrating in 50 years. Very, very important.
All right. Another short break. When we come back, we take some of your SMSs and your Facebook messages through 3726. That's our SMS line, interface on SABC3. That's how you find us on Facebook. Stay tuned. Quick look at some of your Facebook comments and SMSs. Bumi Mali says we have a long way to go. Xenophobia is dividing us, but substantial progress has been made, and come 2063, Africa will be a force to be reckoned with. So a positive comment there. Kenneth Kundwani says we are not united. We are still fighting each other, and this has to stop. Desni says, I don't think Africa is united. It has to start with people living in the same country. For example, there's still a lot to be done even here in South Africa with regards to mutual respect, irrespective of ethnicity, language, cultural beliefs, etc. And there's some improvements, but there's a lot that still needs to be done. So looking at some of the issues that are raised here and just some of the things that people are always concerned about when it comes to Africa, what is the solution going forward, Kofi?
To me, I think as long as people can get most of the daily needs met, which is literally economics, when people are satisfied at those levels, they tend to really come together. So that's one. And as I said again, there are two elements for me that are important. The quality of the governance, which means the quality of the people who are governing us, who are governing Africa, who understand how the world is going. And you've said something about African solutions for Africans. It's a good slogan. But we have to take the resources to fix the continent wherever we need it. If it's coming from China, if it's coming from Japan, if it's coming from Uganda, and we can use it, manufacture it, use it to articulate, to help find our solutions, we should be able to use it.
Just on that point, can we get the quality of leadership that you're talking about when we have a very strong peer review system in Africa, and we are heavily dependent on that? We say to outside people, leave us, we'll sort it out. We have a peer review system. Is it a prudent way to go?
Yes, we can. I mean, this continent is crawling with talented people. Just that the few who are running it, as we say, it takes a thief to recognize a thief. So it will take a leader to recognize a leader, a good leader. And we don't have most of it. Or we dismiss people who are talented enough, who want to make things happen, being a corrupt-free environment, get rid of nepotism, or any other system that are so secret. We need to have them come above, and so that at least if they trickle up, they can pull other people.
Mark, you know, it's said that Africa has about $1.67 trillion in untapped potential wealth. How do we unearth that? What do we need to do to actually recognize that and use it?
Oh, well, I think one of the objectives of the organization is to put some resources on the research, especially in science and technology. I think if the continent, the organization can help do this, make it a reality of putting some resources, educating our youth, we can then have these human resources to work to make our values a reality. But currently we don't have that. Currently we're sitting in the resources. We don't have the human resource to work out and make it a value, a potential value for the continent.
You mentioned, Kofi, how, you know, if a solution comes from China or Japan or wherever, we must just take whatever works for this continent. But is it really advisable to open ourselves up as a continent to the outside? Are these people not coming to plunder and go?
These are what we call institutional prejudices and fears. Anything that you see that's coming from outside that looks foreign, there's an enormous amount of superstitions about the foreigners. And we've got to be able to see through that. Others will tell you, China is coming to plunder. But who else hasn't been here and plundering for 300 and 400 years?
But does that mean we should let China come and plunder if they are coming to do that?
We need to learn from that and make a case and use whatever you can use. Let me give you a simple example. The technology environment, we have close to a good half of that, half of the African population is the young people. What are they doing? Most of them have no jobs. Most of them will probably never get a job again, probably 350 million or so and more. Now, there is a space for them not just to get bored, but to put them to work in the technology sphere. And what is really constraining them is, of course, the taxes on importing things where you can create safe zones for kids and the young to play on technologies to develop all sorts of applications to help Africa. But what do? You look at the taxes of most of our countries, barriers on doing business is horrendous. You can't. And that's something, that's a very clear place where you can lift those barriers and lift people. People can't move very quickly. And if I have to tell you, before I can go to Botswana, as an African, somebody needs to know my bank accounts, visa, and so forth, doing about 2-3 months before. But a young European who comes from Paris or Luxembourg comes here, roams the continent for the whole year.
It's a serious problem.
It is indeed.
Just finally then, Mark, are you optimistic about what you're seeing in terms of BRICS now and just the kind of attention that Africa is getting at the moment?
You know, the African Union actually giving us hope. That's what we believe in the African Diaspora Forum. That's why we're organizing ourselves. I say we're having the heritage here. People are organizing. Countries are organizing themselves. The BRICS, as you're citing, can give us hope and giving us hope for real to say that, well, the next years to come, this continent will rise. And Africans can then join forces together and do things that we didn't do in the past. Right. The organization is a very good identity for Africans to know that, no, we're coming from very far, but we'll take it.
We are getting somewhere.
Yes,
and
the key
BRICS,
to it is, if there's a BRICS, that means it seems like we have something to offer. And nobody will be interested in you if you didn't have anything to offer.
All right, so thank you, BRICS, and thank you to both of you for coming through to talk about this wonderful subject, and that is the African continent. Thank you for your participation in the program, and do join us again next week at the same time. From me, Tembisa Machel, and the team, good night.